Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting. So first of all, I'm introducing myself. My name is Chiara Martinelli, and I'm the director of Climate Action Network Europe. So welcome to this session here today. Let me highlight, first of all, that this side event has been organized by EcoAction, EcoClub, Ukrainian Climate Network, the International Institute for Sustainable Development. So, and also a couple of practical things. As you can hear, it's not very easy to concentrate ourselves in this pavilion. So I really would like to ask, first of all, the speakers to speak slowly and clearly as much as possible, and also to keep your mic very close to your mouth. But also all of you, whenever in the second part, we will have the possibility to raise questions, try to speak as loud as possible. Also, I just wanted to mention for the ones that are more social media geeks, that there will be two organizations live tweeting on this event, Climate Action Network Europe and the International Institute for Sustainable Development, which the handle is IISD_energy. And we have an hashtag of the Ukrainian pavilion, that's hashtag COP27UA. Last but not least, this event is also web streamed by on the YouTube page of the Environmental Minister of Ukraine. So thank you, first of all, to the Ukrainian Pavilion to host us today for this important discussion, and to our distinguished guests that I'm going to introduce in a minute, but also for all of you to join in this conversation. As you probably saw from the invitation, the focus is about the impact of the Russian war against Ukraine on European climate policies and ways forward. So this is really aiming to be quite a broad exchange and a dialogue that we feel we need to have in this COP. And we aim today to focus in particular to the transformations needed in the energy sector as one of the key sector or the key factor, if not the main one, to ensure the implementation of the climate targets, even in this challenging situation. So before we dive into this debate, I hope you all allow me to spend a few words in support of the people of Ukraine. The Russian full-scale invasion came as a huge shock to many of us, and seeing millions of people having to leave their homes, some seeing their homes destroyed to the ground, and loved ones dying in front of their eyes, has been terrifying and is still terrifying. Ukraine's energy and industrial sectors have been attacked constantly. We have once again witnessed repeated attacks to civilian people, which goes against humanitarian law. However, we have been also witnesses the resilience and courage that Ukrainian people are showing every day. So I hope with this exchange and this discussion, where we enter into more like kind of also policy details, if I may say, we can all keep standing in solidarity with people in Ukraine and keep calling for peace as soon as possible. So I hope you are with me on this. So with all that said, today we really wanted to look at how the Russian war against Ukraine brought up evidently as ever before that fossil fuels and climate change impacts exacerbate conflicts, keeping driving the most vulnerable people to suffer even more. This war has made even clearer how heavily Europe relies on fossil fuels. So we wanted to really have a look on how this situation is looking like today from the different perspectives that our speakers are bringing to the table in this exchange. So let me introduce you the speakers. And I'm very happy that despite some challenges on technicalities, we managed to have all our panel complete. But I also wanted to already mention and apologize that the Deputy Minister for Environment in Ukraine, she's still in some other meetings. So we don't know if she will manage to join us or not during the course of this event. So first of all, I would like to introduce you Adam Schwetsch. Sorry for the pronunciation of your family name. Head of the European Green Deal unit at the Energy Community Secretariat that is joining us online. Laurence Toubiana, the CEO of the European Climate Foundation. Philip Gass, the lead energy transition on International Institute for Sustainable Development. Andrei Iyas, energy analyst at the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, also online. Oleksiy Ryabchan.
Oleksiy Ryabchan, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Advisor to the CEO of the National Joint Stock Company Naftogaz of Ukraine. And with all that, I think we can immediately start. So I will ask first to open the dialogue, Adam, really looking at the Russian war against Ukraine and the impact on the debate, the impact and the debate around the EU climate energy policies. I think from the perspective of the energy community, also something has changed as of the 24th of February. And how do you see the development and the situation in the region and in the country in particular? So Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you very much. Just to make sure that you can hear me properly.
Yes, if you can speak even louder, will be great.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much once again, and good afternoon from Vienna on behalf of Energy Committee Secretariat. Thank you very much for the invitation. Unfortunately, I could not be there in person, but Energy Committee Secretariat is planning to be there at COP next week. And we're also looking forward to visit Ukrainian Pavilion. And congratulations for organizing this venue. And I would say that this is a very good opportunity to touch upon the key issues indeed. From our side, on behalf of Energy Committee Secretariat's team, also warm words of support. We have been engaged since the very beginning of this war in supporting Ukraine via our task force, via our fiduciary fund. So once again, words from solidarity on our behalf. Energy Community is an organization that has 9 contracting parties. Of course, Ukraine, apart from that, Moldova, Georgia, and the Western Balkans, 6 countries. And let me then give you the perspective of our organization, which is the perspective of the closest EU neighborhood, which at the same time almost entirely covered by the EU enlargement agenda. So our countries are, I would say, followers of the EU trend-setting approach in the field of climate and energy policy. And from that perspective, I think we are looking at the developments. Here, I would say that when in 2019 European Green Deal was presented, of course, immediately became a reference point for our work. And there's an important thing that issue mentioned in the European Green Deal that resonates very much today as well, is that European neighborhood has to be a part of the European Green Deal so it succeeds. Before focusing on post-24 February reality, let me just briefly recap that there are already quite significant political commitments among our members. We have declarations concerning climate neutrality, Sofia Declaration for Western Balkan countries from 2020. We have also decarbonization roadmap for whole energy community agreed last year. And we have quite ambitious legislative framework based on the European legislation under the Clean Energy Package. So the instruments are there. Now the question, of course, is to what extent the perspective changed after 24th of February. I would say maybe first that in terms of the direction that the policies are going, I would very much like to say that we are that nothing changed in the sense that we are on track. And as example for that, I can also give you the fact that in December, we are planning to adopt very important decision of the Ministerial Council of Energy Community concerning the climate and energy targets for 2030 within the fields of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. What, however, of course, and that goes without saying, changed drastically is the certain perspective that we are looking at the climate and energy policy. Let me focus here on three dimensions. First one, of course, is the political perspective and policy perspective. The EU market EU energy market was certainly not designed for war times, nor was energy community. So this is a key significant challenge, of course, for us. Lesson learned, what is the measurable cost of security of supply? And definitely focus is now being put in a short-term perspective on security of supply. And this creates a certain, I would say, a danger of or temptation for countries covered by energy community to revert to coal, to revert to less ambitious approach. So I think in that context, very important is the EU streamlined message with strength and credibility of the message in the context of our region, which, as I say, really, which we're following really to a large extent the policy developments in the EU. Second, probably the biggest challenge and the biggest, I would say, drastically changed perspective would be the financial implications of the current situation. And I think this is, of course, what to a large extent COP is also focusing in the broader global context. Just to picture, however, more coming back to the European context, to picture the situation in numbers, it's always easier to assess the scale of the problem, the costs, of course, of the transition. Numbers, around 700 billions of euros were already spent by the EU on shielding against the energy crisis, which of course is compounded significantly by the war. This you can set with the number from, I believe, before 21, where Commission was estimating annual costs of achieving European Green Deal until 2030, which was 360 billion euros, which again you can also set with the estimations made by World Bank and European Commission concerning the financial needs of Ukraine, given the rebuilding of the economy, which were estimated in the report a few months ago at 350 billion euros. So this is the scale of the challenge, and of course countries of our organization are much more vulnerable to that process, given that we don't have access to funds that are covering European member states. Hence, this is really a significant context. Third one that I would like to mention is the context of just transition, so the perspective of just transition, which is the concept is at very heart of COP, and which of course is about creating an environment which is socially inclusive, that is focusing very much on those who are most vulnerable. And here, of course, these vulnerabilities are growing and are compounded by the war, by the crisis. So I think the key aspect of the debate is to design the policy in a way that winners or losers are not being created as a consequence of that. Pointing to where we see the opportunity, I think, in the broader policy context, what is visible and what is visible specifically in the European Union's reaction to the crisis is that I would say that the link between security of supply and decarbonization in the more midterm, long-term perspective was never that strong as it is now, which is very emblematically also pointed out under REPowerEU. So the challenge is that this balance is being created between these two aspects: security of supply, decarbonization, and affordability, which is this trilemma of energy and climate policy. So as this short-term, I would say, resilience, liquidity measures are being offset by mid-term and long-term decarbonization, which is even more spurred as it is being shown by the EU projections. Last aspect that I want to tackle is, of course, the how to we put in place Ukraine in this situation. I would like to say maybe that even before the war, Ukraine had signaled very ambitious climate agenda in 2020, pointing to willing to access or to be covered by the European Green Deal, which was in the end ended up with the creation of the high-level Green Deal dialogue. So I think taking into account Paris commitments, enlargement context of energy community, clearly and evidently there is no other path than the climate neutrality path for Ukraine. But what, of course, are key elements, critical elements to that post-war exit, decarbonization exit strategy. First thing, what I already mentioned, clear political commitments. Second issue, cross-sectoral, holistic approach to designing the post-war economy fully in line with the green growth. And I would say third element, clearly defined targets and measures to do it. We, as energy community, we have certain, as I mentioned, legal framework to support that. And this exit strategy has to be accompanied by the, of course, strategy to embrace key elements that Ukraine can contribute to the European Green Deal. I'm finishing in the last 10 seconds. Then just to mention, of course, the governance based on the tailor-made National Energy and Climate Plan, which taps on the key potential, which is within the renewables and the decreasing energy intensity of the economy in line with European Green Deal principles. And once again, many thanks. I will stop here.
Thank you, Adam, to already linking up to so many issues and policies that I think, as you said, shows continuity in the efforts of the region to reach the climate targets, but also kind of new or updated challenges to speed up the just transition that you have been mentioning. And I'm sure you triggered some questions that I hope we will have the time to have that space from the after the speakers. So I hand over now to Laurence to continue helping us to reading the situation, and also from the lens, I would say, of someone that is supporting climate action across the globe. So I guess also for you, this triggered something different in the last months.
Totally, and thank you for this invitation. And of course, European Climate Foundation is eager to do whatever we can do to support the Ukrainian civil society, everything we can do, like many others actors in philanthropy, as know, just to support the courage of this nation and these people who are really fighting for the whole Europe. And that's the first message. Thank you for all, because you are in front of this terrible aggression, defending the values that are deeply European. So we should be really, really thanking you all day, and supporting of you as a really a duty. How this invasion of Ukraine has derailed or not the Green Deal agenda, we saw, and listening to Adam, we saw the tensions between the short-term response, the transition of the Green Deal and going to minus 55% by 2030 was supposed, of course, an orderly transition. And of course, now it's not possible anymore, meaning it is a shock. And the decision taken in front of this shock can or accelerate this transition with all the problems that an acceleration means, or doing the bad choice, which is to still bet on fossil fuel, not to change everything, but to lock in the European economy into the fossil fuel era, even if we just should recognize how much this dependence on fossil fuel is a dependent, it's put really the destiny of the collectivity Europe into the hands, practically in the hand of a dictator and an aggressor. And so just continuing that path and not cutting the lines with fossil fuel is really a decision that would, I think, really make a lot of problem for the future. So we are at a crossroads. And for the moment, we see the tension between how much the decisions that are taken for the short term look for other source of gas and reducing the consumption of gas, and at the same time, not investing in the future into, for example, the new pipelines for gas from elsewhere or the LNG terminals that are now flourishing. The decision is still imbalanced in a way. We see government wanting to respond to the energy crisis with finally decisions that would not help the short term, but give a signal that finally we will have a way to be more independent from Russia, but not really to be more independent from fossil fuel. So that's the choice. On the other side, you see that this is accelerating the renewable energy agenda. The document, of course, to try to stop Russian gas imports by 2027 or 2025, which anyway will happen much before anyway, now, almost, is a way to accelerate the investment in renewable energy, because that's the only investment we can do at scale and in time that can really make up, not totally compensate, but make up of a lot of the energy we are lacking now. Of course, what I think is the main problem is the social cohesion in the crisis. On one side, Europe has to build up and increase the effort of solidarity for Ukraine on all levels, military, civil society support, well, everything now, because hospitals are destroyed, problem of water, in a way, infrastructure supporting will be really important in the short term. But at the same time, we have to think together what kind of post-war Europe we want to build together. And I do think that now we see a new type of Europe emerging because of the declaration of Ukraine wanting to integrate the European Union, and followed by others in Western Balkan as well as Eastern Europe, members who are not still members of EU. And so that signify a massive reinvention of what Europe is. And in particular, what are the relations and what is a fundamental element of democracy that Europe should be built in. And that's why the energy transition is very significant. Or we cut the line with authorities and dictatorship, and we get out of fossil fuel addictions, or we go for this green Europe that I think Ukrainian people are ready to build together with EU. So I think it's very difficult to talk about the post-war now, once really every day the discussion is, well, the situation is more dramatic, more death, and more destruction. But I think that's the only way. We have to look for peace, but we have to look for peace in a system where these values Ukrainian people are fighting for are really respected and embedded in this new project. So I do think this energy transition is not a technical issue, is a political and a social issue, but we need then to be merged, to develop much more solidarity within the different countries, and in particular, in the case of the most affected household, because if not, the price paid by all the more affected by the energy crisis will be really people will resent enormously these values of Europe because they will not understand what is happening. So in a way, that's how I read the situation. The Green Deal is still the guardrail for EU after the COVID crisis. After now, within that war, they are not losing the lodestar, but we need really to think very quickly, what do we will want to build together once we can finish that war?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laurence. I think that was very helpful, also helping us also to challenge us, like, and already looking at which kind of future and which kind of peace and energy climate policies we wanted to build while we are still fighting. So I think with Philip, now we can go a little bit also continue on that trends of looking at what change in energy and climate policies in Europe in the debate and in actually some of the steps that have been taken in the last months.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. I really appreciate being able to be here, and especially honored that ISD can co-sponsor the event here today. So when I look at it in that first question about what's changed, and some things have changed maybe more negatively, and some, we talk about this acceleration. To address the first question first, one thing that came to me very personally, anecdotally, is watching the news just over the past summer. There was a discussion about what the alternative fuel sources might be, and one of the things that was brought up on the news was there was a push for manufacturers and other heavy energy users to move to other energy sources, and one of them was heavy fuel oil, which is much more polluting than natural gas. So there is a push in the immediate to try to just ensure energy security through any means possible, and that can potentially have negative impacts in terms of meeting climate targets. But in my personal opinion, those have been far outstripped by the long-term thinking, and the long-term thinking being that we need to free ourselves from fossil fuels and fossil fuel imports in general. We've seen that in the acceleration of the Fit for 55 plan, some numbers that we've dug up from our research and are in the plan, acceleration of solar installations of up to 420 gigawatts by 20%, an increase in 80 gigawatts of solar and wind power installations over the next several years, and a doubling to 10 million of heat pump installations over the next 5 years as well. This is that long-term thinking that says that this isn't just, we have to deal with the immediate energy security and energy access challenge, but we need to do it in a way that sets us up for the long term. I live in Switzerland, but I'm originally a Canadian by nature. And one of the ways that Canada was looking to assist was, is there an opportunity to export energy to Europe? And one of the very first ways that was examined was exporting fossil fuels, exporting liquefied natural gas. But research by us and by others quickly identified that even to be able to get the infrastructure in place is 5 to 10 years down the road. And by then you're not consistent with climate policies anyway. And so the dialogue quickly turned to discussion about alternatives, about green hydrogen. For those who are watching online, there's a quote right here on the wall about the potential of producing green hydrogen in Ukraine. And other countries are looking at that too, and saying we need to not be reliant on these fossil fuel deposits and not being reliant on the export and import market that's there, and that the transition to renewables is the one that's much more stable over the long term. So I think in terms of the, I don't like to use the word opportunities, but in terms of some of the things that are coming out of it, the acceleration of clean energy is certainly a big part of it, and I think a piece that's going to have the longest term impact. And so while we might have some hurdles in meeting climate policy in the immediate term as we push to ensure energy security, and there's a lot of also debate over, do we need to subsidize energy because prices are really, really high, and subsidize fossil fuel energy? And that's a challenge as well that we need to examine. But if we are going to support fossil fuel subsidies in the short term, it has to be in the mind of a long-term transition towards clean energy, and ensuring that that energy is produced locally, ensuring that it's coming from secure supply lines, and ensuring that we are not forsaking climate energy targets in the name of security, because both have to go hand in hand, somewhat in the short term, but also in the long term as well. One other thing just to mention briefly as well is I think a big push for efficiency. The less energy we use, the less energy we need. And we've seen different scenarios in Europe, everything from in terms of learning about actions we can take at home, replacing windows. My son's a competitive swimmer. He's been informed that the pools that he's swimming in are going to have reduced heating just to reduce energy. But there's also talk of energy rationing if energy becomes quite tight as well. And I think there's a big public education part of that, part of this campaign as well. So while I think in the short term, to sort of sum up, there is a risk of some of the immediate climate targets and the ability to meet them if we do have to offset gas with gas from further away, from places like North America or places further away. But over the longer term, we're going to be better off, and we're going to have locally produced clean energy power that's going to assist us in meeting these climate targets. And when I'm looking at the curves for renewables taking on, it's only accelerated. And I think while we had this initial shock, I think those curves towards renewable energy are only going to be accelerated in the long term as well. And that's not just within Europe directly, but globally, and also within, from the quote here on the wall, looking at the renewable energy potential in Ukraine as well, and the potential to produce things like green hydrogen. So maybe I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip, also for sticking to the time. And without further ado, I give the word to Andrei, that I think will help us to continue on those lines. Also, because if I well remember, Andrei, you together with CREA and Amber already in June produced a research that was looking at the impacts of the war into the speeding up of the climate action. So I'm curious to know, like, what's happening now. What's your perspective?
Definitely. Thank you very much for the invitation and for having us. Yeah, we started very early looking at the situation, and we're continuing to assess it as it unfolds. I prepared some slides, but unfortunately I cannot share them. So I don't know if people still want to have the slides, but if not, I can gloss over them.
I think they are trying to give you the right to share.
Awesome. That's very much.
Just a second.
Yeah, I can share, and I will do it right away. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Yeah. So thanks a lot for having me. Unfortunately, I do not have a Ukrainian flag as Adam, so I regret that. And also, I met my colleague last week, and he had a NAFO T-shirt, which I will buy very soon as well. Other than that. Let's start quite going into what we are doing. So the main issue that we figured out in the beginning was that fossil fuels revenues finance war, and specifically in Russia, more so since the federal budget is very dependent on exports of fossil fuels. So early on in February, we at the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, based out of Finland and everywhere else in the world with our analysts, have been tracking the exports of Russian fossil fuels since the start of the war, mainly to estimate the revenues, to see how they evolve, and more important going forward, to track willing buyers. Our main findings related to this is that on average, approximately 30% of the market value of Russian fossil fuels end up in the federal state coffers, financing the invasion in Ukraine. So there's a direct link between fossil fuel revenues and the war against Ukraine currently, which is very important to stress when we discuss about this. Other than that, of course, everybody was shocked by the invasion. We also anticipated that there will be action. There will be action on the climate front, on the security front, and on the energy front. So we have been tracked. We have tracked the policy responses of the EU countries following the war in Ukraine. We noticed back in June, when we launched our report, Shocked into Action, that 19 European governments have increased ambition on decarbonization in the last 2 years, but also after the war has started. Additionally, and this is quite new in terms of prominence, there are 5 countries that have introduced additional low carbon measures for heating, industrial or residential, and for decarbonization of the industry. Overall, the global message is understood that Europe has to be less and less dependent on fossil fuels, and steps have been put in place to do that. Once again, Russia's aggression and the corresponding volatility in global electricity prices have stressed the need to phase out fossil fuels and accelerate decarbonization, just to limit the exposure to this immense risk that we've seen. The latest EU country plans see about 31% less fossil fuel electricity in 2030 compared to 2019 strategy, with the main aim of reducing emissions in Europe, but also very important, reducing the dependence on imported fossil fuels and the financing of regimes that cannot be checked and cannot cooperate peacefully with neighbors. More so, we have seen that EU country strategies now plan for 63% of renewable electricity in 2030, up from previous commitments that were at 55%. Again, EU countries have cut fossil fuel power generation planned in 2030 by about 31%. Compared to 2019 national energy and climate plans. There was a lot of talk recently in Europe about the resurgence in fossil fuel use, and especially in power, and especially of coal use in power, due to short-term issues related to the tightness of the gas market. We have recently looked at the situation at the CO2 emissions in Europe, and we have seen that the EU's emissions of carbon dioxide from energy use, including all sectors, have fallen by about 5% over the past 3 months, compared with the same period of 2021. Main drivers of this evolution are the demand for fossil fuels is falling because of high prices and the security implications of the current war, and there is strong wind and solar output and installations, which actually come contrary to the fears of a resurgence of coal and gas use due to the energy crisis. So to sum up, this part is well, as I said, as we said back in June, Europe was shocked. We started following events that have implication over the policies, and the measures put in place are more ambitious than previous. And as we go further, there will be even more announcements on the decarbonization space, mainly due to the double issue of emissions reduction, but more so in this context of eliminating dependence on Russian fossil fuels and other fossil fuels of different provenance. Going forward, so we keep on working and quantify all these policies, and we will launch soon a report on G7 countries, of which 3 countries are EU members. We see up to 2013 actually a decline in fossil fuel use in all transport, heating, industry, and power across the G7 countries. In some countries more marginally, in some sectors more accelerated, but overall the current war in Ukraine has once again showed the dramatic implication of a dependence on fossil fuels on our lifestyles, if you want, and the peace and economic prosperity of our countries. That was all I had for us. So it was Andrei Lash from CREA. Happy to answer questions and engage in further debates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrei. It's always useful also to see those graphs that give us an idea of the scale of what we are talking about. So that was very, I think, very fitting in the flow of the conversation we are having here. So now, last but not least, I give the word to Oleksiy. Like from your perspective of working with one of the largest company in Ukraine, like I think it would be very interesting to hear, how do you see also the role of Ukraine in the decarbonization in this particular moment?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to bring up. First of all, I'd like to bring apologies from the Deputy Minister Svetlana Grinchuk, who is now at the plenary because the video of our president is now like in the process of being streamed. So she is a like deputy party chief, needs to be there and to report because there are some technical issues. But she sends the best regard and to say that the Ministry of Environment and all the government of Ukraine is doing their best in these circumstances, not to forget about climate changes and for our development being green. And believe me, I know that they are doing hard. And I guess it's my first time at COP, and it's my 7th COP in a row. Basically, I'm the climate negotiator from Ukraine till 2015. But it's my first time at COP when I'm also a representative of an oil and gas national big company. But for me, it's not a problem to speak on behalf of my company because I have a different hats. And I would say that I'm among the top 10 Ukrainians with the biggest carbon negative impact. So basically the amount of CO2 that my actions engage is like, it's enormous as I counted. I have my circular career in green business, in green politics. I used to be a member of Ukrainian parliament of a previous convocation and a green policy maker. I returned to green business, but still I also advising the government, the prime minister, the deputy prime minister on a Green Deal issue and a different transition. So basically, before the war, before the 24th of February, I was really proud that we as Ukrainians were able to submit the most ambitious NDCs ever for Ukraine. So it was about the real reduction of CO2, not about hot air that we used to sell, but about a real reduction. And believe me, it's such a hard decisions to be taken politically with the prime minister, with the president, with a huge lobby from business. But we were really serious about them. We were like really intended to create a emission trading system. It was our European obligation in 2024-25. We were about on the track to it. And when I was a member of parliament, we adopted a law that has my co-signature on monitoring, reporting, verification, and many others like cool and green stuff that I'm championed, then implemented this in the ministry. We were aligned as a country, non-European Union member, but we were aligned to a Green Deal issues. And we're really proud of many of this stuff. In my company, Naftogaz, we were about to be the first Ukrainian green hydrogen producer in Ukraine. So we were about to sign a contract on electrolyzers. We had all the off-taker agreement, and we were like sending signal, yes, like we will deliver these targets, but it happened the war. And I'm originally from Donetsk. So the war for me started not this year, but like many years ago. And I've been relocated for the second time, first from Donetsk to Kyiv. Then on February with 4 generations of my family from Kyiv to Lviv. Now I'm back to Kyiv. It's much more secure center for our army who liberated a lot of area and will liberate more. But I guess just to tell you that it's really hard to, you know, I listen to the debate and like everything should be green and clean. I completely agree with this and all my career is about this. But it's really hard to implement now in Ukraine. So all the, I don't know, NDCs that we are adopted, are they relevant now? I don't know, because we lost the industry. I was born in Mariupol city. in the maternity house that has been destroyed by Russian bomb. I bet a lot of people saw this picture. Mariupol was the industrial heartland of Ukraine, and now all the industry is dead. It could be reconstructed, and it will be reconstructed when we will liberate it, and it will be security guarantees, and it will be the green metallurgy, because it doesn't make any sense to reconstruct the, I don't know, past century technology. But it costs a lot, and it will require a lot of time. But how to calculate it right now? I don't know. How the prime minister could set a goal. We had a lot of, 35% of renewable till 2030. We had a lot of these kind of goals as a state, but they're all irrelevant. And you cannot manage your ministry according to the strategies because they're all dead. How can you report, to any kind of a plan that respective colleagues from the energy community is trying to set when it's a huge uncertainty? But like in Ukraine, we used to kind of live with this uncertainty, and we receive this uncertainty as a usual routine, unfortunately. I wish that my country become a very boring country, not like to kind of be eliminated from all the headlines, but unfortunately it's not the case anymore. So you need to adopt towards this, and like you're still doing a lot of green stuff. For example, with my company, we are investing in first bio CHP boiler. So the city of Akhtirka, it's 200 kilometers near the Russian borders. In March, the only gas boiler CHP has been destroyed. So we decided to invest as a company to a CHP boiler, and it will be commissioned in 2 weeks to send a signal, basically, that even during the war, you can provide heat with a kind of carbon neutral source of heat. And when we tried to find a finance for it or co-finance, we weren't able to find it because nobody would finance the plant that could be shelled from Russia because it's a risk insurance, because you need guarantees, you need blah, blah, blah. And all of this kind of a blah, 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 we hear from, yeah, it will be a green reconstruction. We will give you a huge amount of money. We have a pressure from an NGO community that Ukrainian reconstruction should be green. And we wish to do this, but at what cost? Now we invest our own money. And like, believe me, when we lack of the gas in our gas storage to heat up now, currently, like a lot of people are freezing because they are heated with the wooden, like 2 centuries ago. A lot of people, including my wife now, is without electricity. When you don't have electricity in the center of Kyiv, you automatically do not have the mobile connection, internet, and you just like basically the activity is being stopped. So, and this is a paradox. And I bet us, not only me, but also more like people who work in the NGO. So you are pro-climate, you're pro-green, but you're like so dependent from this fossil fuel. So what recipe do we have? Definitely in like we work in a oil and gas company, and our first task is to survive the winter. But like we have our plans for the decarbonization because we need first to rely on our own gas extraction, not to consume the gas from Europe. We are the most energy inefficient nation in the world, I would say, and we have a huge potential there. So if we are able to decrease our consumption, if we are able to decrease our consumption as a final consumer, and this is a challenge for us as a gas company to decrease the amount of methane emission and etc. So our own operational efficiency, it will give us more resources. If we shift to bioresources, and we as a agrarian country has a huge potential in linking up the agrarian sector, the wooden sector with the heat production. If we will increase the green energy, hydrogen, biomethane, we have a huge potential in this. We'll be able not only to be so self-sustainable, but to ship this green and low carbon energy to Europe. And I really do believe that it will be the case. The question is who will pay for this? We will definitely have money for the reconstruction. And this is my pledge to you. So please help us, like to push for your government, for Ukrainian reconstruction and recovery being green. Energy companies should be accountable to all of the climate neutral strategy, which we had before the war. And now government, they're thinking about the green, but be patient because now it's about a survival, and survival might be a bit of a fossil fuel. But later, there is no chance for us than to leapfrog because we don't need to invest in the like all-century technology. We don't need to be a lock-in, and this is a chance for us to create a sustainable future. Sorry for saying kind of as a climate activist for 15 years, sorry to say about some painful truth, but this is a cruel reality. And I believe that the future of Ukraine will be green, and happy to ask you a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrei, because I think we do need to keep reminding ourselves where we are at the moment as well. I think we are very good as NGOs to think about big plans and big pictures, but it's very, we also saw with the impact of the war on the development of energy policies in Europe, for instance, we do have to learn so much to be better in the short-term reactions and short-term measures. Of course, with the big vision in mind, and we believe that, another world is possible, that will be greener and all of that, but we also need to be better in answering to the challenges that people have right now, and in particular, of course, in Ukraine at the moment. Okay, I think all our speakers did a great job to help us to go through this discussion, to create also a space for dialogue. I don't know about you, but I really felt also a lot of trust in this exchange. So I guess we can open the floor if anyone has a particular question to one or the other speakers, or if you have anything you would like to share to enrich this exchange. And I would recommend that you introduce yourself before you start speaking. Yes, and I think we have a microphone. And same, you need to speak very loud and with a microphone like this. So there is the lady there.
Thank you very much to Ukraine for having this really important conversation about the climate and environmental impacts of war. It's a conversation that's long overdue at COP. And I want to point out that in my long experience with COP, I've never seen a pavilion from Afghanistan, from Iraq, or from Libya, countries that have suffered from US and NATO wars, and there's been no accountability and no green rebuilding of those countries. But my question is, I'm wondering about the climate and environmental impacts of all of the weapons that Canada, for instance, and the United States are sending to Ukraine. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we pick up a couple of questions if it's okay for you. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Diana Junquera. I work for Industrial Global Union as Energy Industry Director and Just Transition as well. And I would like, my question is specifically from you, because you work in an energy company and we are defending workers' rights. And now we are aware of the situation in Ukraine, and we would like to know, how are you protecting workers on this terrible situation? And now that we understand what is happening, but also in the future, what are you planning for those workers? And also because you mentioned Just Transition and also the colleague from the Green Deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I take the last one? Okay, not for now. So please, you want to start?
Yes, on your question. First of all, I'm really proud that we have a Ukrainian first ever pavilion. This was a deliberate decision, and I would say it cost a lot. And there was a debate: should we, as nation, as asking for money for for survival, basically, spend money for such a brilliant pavilion? But the decision was yes, because we would like to share our idea, our thoughts. And like, I really, when I just jumped in here from a negotiation room, I feel my, how to say, goose skin because of such a big audience. So thank you for being here. And answering to your question, it's really such an enormous that the Canada, the US, the UK, the European Union providing us with the weapon, with the support, with the ammunition, with trading. It gives us hope that we definitely will liberate our nation, we will liberate our country. And this gives me an opportunity to be optimistic, because with this kind of a weapon and support, and with the bravery of our soldiers, I truly believe that we will have our country as in a recognized border 1991 as we become independent. So for us, it's a war on independence, the same that United States has 200 years ago. Basically, we consider the same. And when we will liberate our country with the mean of this weapon, it means that they will help us to become to make our country more green, because the Russian weapon is the one that is destroying the wind turbines. The Kherson, Odessa, so the Black Sea region is where the best sun and the best wind. I can send you the pictures when Russian tanks is just playing and crushing the solar panels, when they're just deliberately shooting the wind turbine. So the Russia aggression is like anti-green. This is written in their in their energy strategies, that the climate is a threat to their security. And the weapon that is provided us by our allies and with our soldiers is, I would say, like in your terms, it's pro-green, because like definitely after the liberation, this territory will become more green and more secure, and the wind turbine will continue to function. And answering to your questions, like, thank you for this, because we are the biggest company in Ukraine with more than 50,000 employees, and around 100 of them died because of the aggression, died in action, or being recruited to the army and suffered. And in the beginning of aggression, we spoke with a lot of trade unions who helped us, for example, to move the families to Europe, to place them in, I don't know how to call it, to the summer houses or summer base of different companies. A lot of companies and their trade unions provide us with assistance, with trainings, with huge. So we feel such solidarity, and when this makes, as I said, like this makes very optimistic when you feel that you are not alone. And like by protecting, like we, for example, from the USA, we received the personal protective equipment for our not soldiers, for our workers, because they work in they still extract gas 10 kilometers from the action zone. They still provide heat. They still do a lot of stuff. So like we are buying this personal protective equipment, and we are procuring them. We receive first aid kits. We receive a lot of this kind of stuff from our friends and partners. So we feel the solidarity. So we are doing this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm just checking if there is any particular question. Otherwise, I will go back to our speakers. And I see Philip, wanted to come in.
Yeah, just briefly, we're an organization that works on just transition and clean energy transition. And obviously those are very important, but I think it's really important to understand and to recognize and to remember, without energy access, without energy security, you can't have any sort of energy transition, let alone a clean energy transition. We're also an organization I mentioned earlier works on fossil fuel subsidy reform, and we try to get towards clean energies by reforming subsidies. But sometimes in the short term, those subsidies are needed. So people have access to energy, have access to affordable energy, and can be able to heat their homes and be able to feed their families. And so I see that really closely linked to the issue of just transition, that without that access and without that security as a starting point, you can't have a just transition to even start without those basic fundamental building blocks.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Adam, can I take advantage before you leave a last point from you? Because I think like from where we started, from your input about also the role of the energy community and the role of the EU in this, I hope that triggered to you some maybe some comments or some suggestions also on how we can navigate this short-term, long-term support to a just energy transition that should happen.
Maybe just a very short comment also on what Alexei said about Ukrainian efforts, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is an extremely difficult exercise to design the post-war strategy when really we have constantly changing data. For example, I mentioned in my previous intervention issue of renewable energy and the role of renewable energy in the European and Ukrainian Green Deal in the future, and the data that we are having, and this is the data that is becoming out of date, as I say, every minute, is that 1/4 of the renewable infrastructure is being either destroyed, either seized, or either under the occupation, right? So we're moving in this kind of an environment. I would say that from my side of the energy community, and what is our principal role in the process, apart from, of course, the the ad hoc support, which as being Energy Community Secretariat member, I'm really proud of, and really proud of the work that colleagues are doing here. We have also a lot of beautiful people from Ukraine that joined our secretariat. So we have, of course, what we can do, we are doing from the perspective of Energy Community Secretariat. But designing the midterm, long-term strategy, I would revert to our existing objectives already. I think regardless and of the timing, I would say that in any case we have to have ready both strategies and both legislation. And I think the focus in any case, and I think I would have to say that Ukrainian colleagues from the Ukrainian administration are doing a great job, because we're in constant contact with them, are nevertheless pushing the necessary legislation. So we are discussing legal acts concerning, for example, the governance of the climate and energy. For example, carbon pricing was mentioned. That would be another element to be discussed in this very difficult environment. So I think we have a list of issues that should be a part of a comprehensive tailor-made plan with the engagement of donors, of international financial institutions, possibly in a form of a future roundtable. All that should be brought to the discussion, and our role here is to have already prepared potential scenario solutions for the Green Deal for Ukraine. So that would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for being with us. And I guess we will see each other next week when you will be traveling here. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again, and best regards from Vienna. See you.
Okay, we still have a little bit of space for a couple of points, if anyone wants to. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Olga Boyko, coordinator of CAN Eastern Europe, Caucasus, Central Asia, and I'm also based in Ukrainian NGO EcoAction. I have a general question, so it's not necessarily to any of the speakers, whoever has a capacity to imagine the answer right now, because my answer concerns the possible future. So we see this is the first Ukrainian pavilion. It means that Ukraine is more present on the international level. We are potentially members of the EU in some years, you know, so it means that we are more visible, we have more responsibility as well. How do you think it will look next year in case this is as planned, the year when we win the war and we start the reconstruction full scale? What does it mean for the next COP? What does it mean for other international platforms where currently only like videos of Zelensky are being showed and there's a lot of solidarity and support? But after the victory, there's actually going to be a lot of work and a lot of responsibility, and there's going to be some kind of different, for me, at least it seems, some kind of different type of participation of Ukraine on the level of the EU, on the international level. How do you think it will change if you can imagine this right now? How would you imagine it in a perfect world, maybe? That's my question.
Thank you, Ola, for the easy question. I don't know if anyone wants to go first. Andrei?
Thank you. I can. It's a very difficult question, I would say, and it's as you all know, and we've seen this year and the last year. It's very difficult to discuss about the future and have a meaningful conversation. Sort of, let's say, predict the future. What's certain is that it is true that there will be a lot of reconstruction going on in Ukraine, and there will need to be support for this reconstruction. But the greater lessons, as we've seen from our work at CREA, is that fossil fuels concentrated in the hand of dictators, of autocrats, are actually very dangerous for the global order, for the regional security, and for countries such as Ukraine or the others that are bordering these countries. So the lesson that we need to take on reconstructing Ukraine and other countries is a lesson in which we are decarbonizing our economies and are using less and less fossil fuels to run our lives, I would say.
Thank you, Andrei. Maybe I can add to that from my perspective as a Climate Action Network Europe. I think our imaging the future also of this relation, I think it's really like dependent on us, as we heard, especially from Laurence and from Philip. Like the best way I feel the European Union can build this trust and this relation for the support of the reconstruction is doing very well now in the implementation of the energy and climate policies that we currently have under negotiation under the European Green Deal package. I think this is, we always say also when we come to space like this in a very global community space, like the best way we can contribute is doing well at home. So I think I think in the short term, this is the best way that as a European Union we have to build the support needed next year, hopefully. Please go ahead, Alex.
To continue what you are saying, completely agree with you, because I know that a lot of my friends who are now fighting in trenches, men and women, they are supporting the European future of Ukraine. We definitely know that we will liberate our country and we will join the European Union. And with the Green Deal agenda, so when we will open the negotiation chapter to become the member of European Union, we definitely need to implement huge amount of policies and politics and the key, and it will be really hard. It will be really hard, and knowing that we are like in a post-war situation, but it will be a very creative exercise that we will be engaged in. So we will definitely go this pathway. So we don't see any other way. But what also I'd like to see is the European Union green dependency on Ukraine. It means that if European Union will be dependent, such as they dependent now on Russian gas, I hope cut as soon as possible, on Ukrainian green biomethane, on Ukrainian green hydrogen, on Ukrainian organic products, on Ukrainian green metallurgy, lithium, and etc. It's a common beneficial exercise that business and the government and everybody needs to be engaged in. So we will see what it will be after the liberation. It will be really hard, but it will be creative, and we do believe in this.
Just to take it a little bit of a different angle as well, you know, the question made me think, what about a year from now, assuming that war is over and we're focused more on reconstruction, you might also see more of a focus on resilience to climate change, certainly with damage to infrastructure, with damage to the ability to respond to natural disasters and other climate impacts. That's going to have to be a huge part of green reconstruction. We're talking a lot about security and energy and a clean energy transition, but I think a greater focus on resilience is going to certainly be needed as well.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, I am just checking if there are still questions or statements. Otherwise, maybe I try to wrap up. Also, because we are losing speakers, it's always, don't worry, it's always like this at COP. Like, it's very crazy, like to stick to our agendas. So I think we were already successful to have all of them here. So yeah, I mean, maybe just to share my takeaways, I think we heard a lot of messages, a lot of provocations and challenges ahead of us. I think the main, my main takeaway is that this is also, I also don't like use the word opportunity, but I don't have another word in English, so I will use that. I think this momentum is an opportunity to really leave fossil fuels to history once for all. And I think this is, we never happened to be so close to that, at least in the European continent. So I think we need to keep fighting for that, as Andrei said, but also avoiding that we lock in in other dependencies. You mentioned on Ukraine, but we see here at COP also what Europe sometimes is playing in terms of creating dependencies, for instance, on gas from Africa or from other regions of the world. The second takeaways, I think, is we heard a lot about ramping up, strengthening investments in renewables, including on energy efficiency. I think this is really going hand in hand with the efforts that we are seeing in the European Union on the Fit for 55 package. And I think this is, we can't, again, like is an opportunity we cannot lose. And being cautious what that really means today, especially in Ukraine and for the reconstructions, I think it's important to keep in mind. And then I think I also heard a lot about, you know, this just transition. I think Lola that is how I would like to see the future. But also I think we also heard like how much we need to look at the energy transition, not as a technical issue, but really a political and social issues. I think only with that lens, we will manage to make sure that we will have the energy transition we are all hoping for, and that has the right support to the people more in need. And then lastly, but not least, I think we also go away with a little bit of a dilemma, to be honest, like on how can we handle the short-term and long-term measures. How can we handle that? And I think we heard, especially from Philip, like really having this big systemic vision as our ultimate goal, I think will help us to make sure that everything we propose as short measures are also even if sometimes they sound compromises, are the right compromises we can take to accelerate the energy transition that we want to see and not to fall in any additional traps. I think these are my takeaways. I'm still happy if someone wants to add anything, and otherwise we close here. And I think we close with where we started by standing in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. And thank you, all of you that you are here, thanking the Ukrainian Pavilion to hosting us and our amazing speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.